Richard Rowland Kirkland was born in August 1843 in Kershaw County, South Carolina, the son of a farming family in a region where cotton fields pressed up against pine forests and sandy lanes. He grew up in a culture that prized duty and deference to elders, shaped by church-going rhythms, seasonal harvests, and the expectation that a young man would place family before self. His father's lessons were practical. Keep your word, lend a hand, and don't leave a neighbor wanting. Those lessons would echo in ways no one in Flat Rock could have foreseen. When the war clouds gathered in 1861, South Carolina rushed forward. Local companies formed on courthouse greens, boys-fitted uniforms cut by mothers and sisters at home. Kirkland enlisted in the Camden Volunteers, Company G, 2nd South Carolina Infantry, a regiment that would serve in Joseph B. Kershaw's brigade and see some of the hardest marching and ugliest fighting in the fucking by. Army of Northern Virginia. Contemporary summaries place him at the center of that arc. Manassas, the Peninsula, Maryland, Fredericksburg, Chancellorsville, Gettysburg, and finally, the Western Theater at Chickamauga. He was small town and soft-spoken, the sort who listened more than he talked. In letters home, men from Kershaw County tended to write about weather and health rather than philosophy. Kirkland's surviving profile isn't polished by self-revelation. Instead, his character must be read from the testimony of others, and from one terrible, luminous day on a Virginia hillside. By all accounts, he was steady, uncomplaining, and crucially, decisive. Do the needed thing could have been his watchword, though no letter of his says so. By the fall of 1862, he had seen enough of war's machinery to know what musketry does to a body, what artillery does to a line, and what fear does to a heart. He had also learned a veteran's calculus: when to keep your head down, when to move, when to risk a sprint across open ground. Those instincts would matter at Fredericksburg. When war came in 1861, South Carolina leapt first. The Camden Volunteers, Company G of the 2nd South Carolina Infantry, mustered in that April, their knapsacks sewn by sisters and sweethearts, their weapons borrowed from militia stocks. 17-year-old Richard Rowland Kirkland was among them, a wiry farm boy unused to crowds, now swept into a tide of red-trousered zouaves and gray-coated volunteers bound for Virginia. His regiment joined Brigadier General Joseph Brevard Kershaw's brigade, part of what would become the fabled Army of Northern Virginia. The 2nd South Carolina's first major test came at the Battle of Manassas on July 21, 1861. They were stationed near Henry House Hill as the Union assault began to crumble. The clash was chaotic. Green troops firing too high, smoke choking sightlines, men breaking and reforming. Kirkland survived unscathed, though many around him fell. Years later, veteran John S. Bobo of the regiment recalled, "We had not known war until that day. Kirkland stood his ground when some would not. This was his initiation, seeing death close up, yet holding his place. It earned him quiet regard among his comrades." By spring 1862, the regiment faced the brutal grind of M.C. Cleland's Peninsula Campaign. They endured ceaseless marches through swamp, bouts of dysentery, and near starvation as supply trains bobbed in the Virginia mud. At Savage's Station on June 29th and Glendale on June 30th, Kershaw's men counterattacked Union positions in dense woods where visibility dropped to yards. Private Robert Jones described the aftermath. The forest was black with powder smoke. Men lay as if asleep, and Kirkland stepped among them with a face like stone. Though not yet famous, Kirkland was showing the combination of nerve and composure that made him stand out. In September, Lee gambled on an invasion of the North. Kirkland marched with Kershaw through the passes of South Mountain and into the maelstrom at Antietam on September 17th. There, the brigade held the sunken road, later Bloody Lane, trading volleys with wave after wave of Union troops. Casualties were staggering. Sergeant William English later said, "When others fired wild, Kirkland took his time. He loaded as if on the drill field." Antietam was the bloodiest single day in American history, and Kirkland survived it, hardened but not brutalized. When the army recrossed the Potomac, he remained steady, a veteran at 19. On December the 13th, dawn was brittle. Cold breath hung in the air as men adjusted cartridge boxes and checked caps. When the Union lines stepped off, the ground between the town and the wall became an anvil. Confederate rifles barked from the sunken road batteries on the heights, walked shell across the fields. Assault after assault struck and failed. In the churn of smoke, color bearers went down and were replaced by men who knew what it meant to lift the flag in a sleet of lead. By late day, the field in front of the stone wall had become a carpet of blue-coated wounded. Their cries carried, distinct even above the fading artillery. Water, water. Darkness fell. But suffering did not. Through that night, Confederate soldiers along the wall listened to enemies beg for relief they were not permitted to give. On the morning of December 14th, a 20-year-old sergeant from Company G approached his brigade commander. Accounts that circulated in the years after the war agree on the essentials. Kirkland asked permission to bring water and aid to the wounded Federals lying within easy musket shot of the wall. Brigadier General Joseph B. Kershaw later recalled Kirkland's plain words, "General, I can't stand this." According to Kershaw's published reminiscence, which became the backbone of the story after a newspaper editor prompted him to name the Good Samaritan in his brigade, the general hesitated, then relented. He would not order the act. He would not forbid it. Kershaw identified the soldier as Richard Kirkland, the same name later remembered by at least 5 other members of the 2nd South Carolina who placed him on that ground, doing that work. Kirkland gathered canteens, clambered over the wall, and stepped into a space no doctrine could diagram, a killing ground made briefly human. At first, skirmishers lifted rifles. Then they realized what he was doing. One wounded Union man, parched, half-frozen, received water. Another got a blanket tugged over a blood-wet coat. As Kershaw later put it, once men on both sides understood the purpose, the fire slackened and then stilled. For more than an hour, Kirkland paced that field. Kershaw's phrasing is remembered for its stripped clarity. He did not stop until he had relieved as many as he could reach. Modern historians have dissected this story with care. Was Kirkland the only soldier to venture out? Probably not. Was he the one whose name endured? The National Park Service synthesis is cautious but affirmative. There were likely multiple acts of mercy, but the name that emerges corroborated repeatedly within the brigade. and memorialized after the war. Richard Rowland Kirkland. He can never reconstruct the minute-by-minute choreography. We can affirm that the evidence points to a remarkable event. There is also responsible skepticism about memory. Kershaw's fullest account was written in 1880, years after the war, with some rhetorical flourish and at least one correction to earlier reporting. Yet researchers who have sifted the record, including Mac Wyckoff in a widely cited NPS forum series, conclude that Kershaw did not invent the story, and that pre-1880 references to a Confederate Samaritan at the wall existed, even if they did not name Kirkland. In short, embellishments likely, fabrication unlikely. For your audience, the power sits less in hagiography than in detail. Imagine the small things: numb fingers working a cork loose, a young man kneeling so a stranger could drink a grey jacket bowed over a blue coat. In a war remembered for massed volleys and butchery, the image of one sergeant making a space for mercy lingers. That's why a sculptor later cast him forever mid-stride with a canteen. The memorial you can still visit at the base of Mary's Heights. Its inscription calls him the Angel of Mary's Heights, and the dedication speaks of national unity and the brotherhood of man. As one historian summarized, the legend is powerful, but it tells us something about what soldiers and civilians hoped might still be possible in war. In the spring of 1863, Kershaw's brigade fought at Chancellorsville. Lee divided his forces daringly, and Stonewall Jackson's flank attack routed the Union She Corps. Kershaw's men, including Kirkland, slammed into the Union lines near the Plank Road on May the 3rd, advancing through tangled underbrush under blistering fire. Captain James Chestnut noted in a letter home, "Our lines surged like a living wave. Young Kirkland moved with calm purpose, and the men followed him." By now, Kirkland had risen to sergeant. He was known for coolness and for quietly looking after his comrades' needs, sharing canteens, checking on the wounded. This foreshadowed his better-known act of mercy. The 2nd South Carolina next marched north into Pennsylvania. At Gettysburg, they attacked the Union positions on Seminary Ridge and later fought fiercely in the wheat field on July 2nd. The ground was a killing zone of stone walls, boulders, and short-range musketry. Private Samuel Mathis recalled, "The air seemed made of lead." Kirkland kept the line closed, steady as a sergeant major. Though battered, the brigade withdrew in good order. Surviving this carnage cemented Kirkland's reputation as a dependable fighter, and likely led to his promotion to lieutenant that summer. He was just 20. In late summer, Lee detached Longstreet's corps, including Kershaw's brigade, westward by rail to reinforce the Army of Tennessee. It was a desperate bid to save Confederate fortunes in the West. After days crammed into stifling boxcars, they reached northern Georgia and joined the battle raging along Chickamauga Creek. On September the 20th, Kershaw's men charged the rocky slopes of Snodgrass Hill, where Union General George Thomas was making his famed stand. The assault was murderous. Smoke shrouded the ridges, musket flashes stuttered from behind breastworks of logs and stones. Amid the chaos, Kirkland led a small knot of men forward. They found themselves exposed and tried to fall back. A bullet struck him in the chest. Comrades who reached him later recounted his last words as, "Tell my pa, I died right." He died where he fell, 20 years old, a life cut short by the same war that made his name. His body was returned to Camden, South Carolina, and buried in the old Quaker cemetery. Today, moss shades his headstone, and visitors sometimes leave canteens, silent echoes of the mercy he showed at Fredericksburg. A bronze statue by Felix de Weldon, the same sculptor who created the Iwo Jima Memorial, captures the Fredericksburg moment. A young Confederate crouched, canteen extended, caught between danger, duty. The pedestal's carving emphasizes what the story has come to mean. Not Confederate versus Federal, but man to man. Not victory, but mercy. Public historians today handle the narrative with care. They stress evidence and context, and they resist turning a complicated war into a single consoling anecdote. And yet, they also admit the enduring gravitational pull of Kirkland's act. As one Park Service essay put it, "We cannot plot every step or confirm every gesture, but the evidence points to a remarkable event." Another historian frames it as a story people need, proof that in a place dedicated to killing, someone chose compassion. Both readings can be true. A careful history and a moral memory.